The girl had been sitting on that strip of sidewalk for 3 hours and nobody had stopped. Darlene Sykes, 12 years old, back against the brick wall of Earl Hutchins' pawn shop on West 8th Street in Jacksonville, Florida. October 1973. The concrete held the day's heat long after the sun started dropping, and she was sitting barefoot because her left shoe had a hole in the sole and the asphalt out front was worse. She'd learned to choose her pain carefully. The guitar in her lap was a Harmony Sovereign with a hairline crack running from the sound hole to the lower bout, and the two highest strings snapped off since September. She played it anyway. 4 chords, C, G, A minor, F, over and over, her calloused fingertips finding the same positions, the sound thin and buzzing through the broken saddle, and nobody slowed down. That's what 3 hours on a West Jacksonville sidewalk teaches you. A man in dress shoes had stepped directly over her open guitar case that morning. A woman dropped 2 quarters without looking at her face. The city had its own agreement about certain people on certain sidewalks, and Darlene had understood the terms by noon. She kept playing, C, G, A minor, F. Ronnie Van Zant heard it from half a block away. He'd been walking back to his truck, a '69 Ford F-100 with 150,000 miles, and a driver's side window that let in road noise and the smell of the St. Johns River. He'd come off the phone with Alan Walden 20 minutes earlier, their manager, a man Ronnie trusted, which made what Walden had said land heavier than it would have from someone else. The debut album had been out since August. Pronounced Les Nerds Skin Nerd. Al Cooper had produced it. Simple Man was on it. Tuesday's Gone was on it. And Ronnie had carried every word in his head for 3 years without writing a single line down. He didn't write things down. Never had. The lyrics lived in him until the moment he stepped to a microphone, and then they came out right, because the only real editing happened in the years before the studio, not inside it. Walden hadn't said the record was a failure. He'd used words like patience and positioning and maybe thinking differently about the next few months. And Ronnie had said thanks, Alan, and ended the call before the sentence finished. He walked to the truck because the truck was somewhere to go, and he put one boot in front of the other on West 8th Street and heard, coming from the direction of the pawn shop, a guitar missing 2 strings playing 4 chords that stopped him mid-stride. His right boot came down and stayed there. He stood and listened. Not to the technique, because there wasn't much technique to hear. He listened to what was underneath it. The reason someone was working through those 4 chords on a cracked guitar on a Tuesday afternoon with nobody watching. That thing didn't have a name, but Ronnie had been listening for it in music since he was old enough to understand that some people play and some people are trying to say something, and the two aren't always the same. His hand went into his jacket pocket. His fingers found what they always found, a small fishing lure, handmade, the paint rubbed off the back from years of turning. His father, Lacey, had pressed it into his palm on the bank of the St. John's when Ronnie was 9. Before sunrise, water gray and flat, and Lacey saying barely anything, the way Lacey usually did, and then, you know when to wait and when to pull. Ronnie had never been certain whether his father meant fishing. He walked toward the sound. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, take 5 seconds right now. We're under 1,000 subscribers and just getting started. These are the stories that don't make the history books, but they're the ones that stay with you. Subscribe and drop your city in the comments. Darlene didn't look up when the boot stopped in front of her. She'd stopped doing that around the 2-hour mark. She kept her eyes on the strings and kept playing. Ronnie crouched down, not quickly, not making a show of it. He went down slowly until his forearms were resting on his knees, and he was at her level, looking at the guitar. He could see the crack, the shifted saddle, the 2 empty tuning pegs. He looked at her fingertips. The calluses were thick and yellowish, the kind that don't belong on a 12-year-old's hands. How long have you been out here? He asked. She looked up. A man in jeans and a plain white t-shirt, watching her guitar the way people watch something they recognize. Since morning, she said. He nodded. Then he sat down on the sidewalk, not crouching anymore. Actually sat down back against the pawn shop wall, right beside her. The concrete was dirty. He didn't adjust for it. Inside the shop, Earl Hutchins lifted his head from behind the counter. He looked through the fingerprinted window glass at the man sitting on his sidewalk and went very still. He knew that face. "Play something," Ronnie said. She played the four chords, C, G, A minor, F. Slow, uneven, the buzzing saddle sending a faint rattle through each note. She didn't know the chord names. She'd figured out the shapes by pressing her fingers against strings until something sounded like the records her father used to play in the living room at night. Same records every night, her in the kitchen listening through the wall. Ronnie listened with his hand in his pocket, turning the fishing lure. He wasn't listening for mistakes. He was listening for the thing he'd heard half a block away, and it was still there, underneath the wrong rhythm and the missing strings. Something that wasn't learned. Something that was already in her before she picked up the guitar. "Your daddy teach you?" he asked. She stopped playing. Her fingers stayed on the strings. "He used to play records at night," she said. "I learned what the guitar sounded like underneath everything else. He died in February." She said it the way you say something you've had to say enough times that the words come out level. Not flat. Level. There's a difference. Ronnie heard it. He didn't say he was sorry. It seemed to him like the worst response. Not because it wasn't true, but because it put the weight on the person already carrying it. "How old are you?" 12. A woman had stopped on the opposite sidewalk. A man coming out of the hardware store caught the direction of her gaze and followed it and stopped walking. Earl Hutchins had come to his doorway. Nobody came closer. There was something in what was happening that everyone standing there could feel had its own edges, and crossing them would change it. Ronnie reached over and picked up the guitar. He turned it in his hands, ran his thumb across the four remaining strings. Then he played the same four chords she'd been playing, but slower, his thumb dropping to the lowest string half a beat before the rest of the chord, giving it a floor. The same chords, the same broken instrument. But the sound had a shape now, a weight at the bottom that her version hadn't had. He handed it back. "Try it like that. Thumb on the low string first. Let that land before anything else comes in." She tried it, got it wrong twice. On the third pass, the thumb landed and the chord settled, and something in her face changed when she heard it. "It sounds different," she said. "Same four chords," Ronnie said. "Same guitar. What changed is you stopped hitting everything at once. Music isn't about playing everything you know at the same time. It's about knowing what comes first." There was a young guy in a Winn-Dixie uniform watching from the corner. Bobby Ray Hollis, 23 years old, off his shift. He stood there a moment, then turned and walked back toward the store parking lot. He came back 4 minutes later with a guitar case, set it on the sidewalk without a word. Ronnie looked up at him. Bobby Ray shrugged. "It's got all 6 strings." Ronnie opened the case and tuned it by ear. 2 pegs, barely moving them, until something almost right became right. He handed the guitar to Darlene. She held it with both hands. When she played the 4 chords on an instrument with all 6 strings for the first time, it didn't sound like a better version of what she'd been playing. It sounded like the thing she'd been trying to play, finally coming through. She played them again and again. Thumb on the bass string first each time, the chord landing with weight under it. Ronnie watched her play and said nothing. There was nothing to say. After a while, he reached into his jacket pocket. He put some folded bills into her open guitar case. He didn't count them in front of her. Then he reached back in for the fishing lure. He held it a moment, thought about the St. John's before sunrise, and Lacey saying almost nothing, and the gray light on the water. His fingertips had found it in that pocket every day for 16 years. He set the lure on top of the bills. "My father gave me that when I was about your age," he said. "He told me you know when to wait and when to pull." He looked at her. "You'll figure out what that means." Darlene looked at the lure, then at him. "What's your name?" he told her. The name took a few seconds. She was searching for where she'd heard it before. Attached to a specific sound, a specific voice coming through the wall from her father's living room. Late at night, a record turning. Then it landed. Ronnie stood up, brushed off his jeans, and started walking back toward the truck. Nobody called after him. There are moments people sense would become something smaller if anything were added to them. Bobby Ray told Darlene to keep the guitar. He drove home and told his wife what he'd seen, and neither of them could find the right words for it, so they ate dinner and both kept thinking about it. Darlene found shelter that week. A resource worker helped make the calls to the house on the west side. Her mother was still there. It took time. These things always do. But she started coming back. A little more present each week until one day Darlene walked in and her mother looked at her when she came through the door. Not through her. At her. Darlene kept the Epiphone. She kept the fishing lure in her front pocket when she played, because she'd made a private agreement with herself about what it meant to carry it. 4 years later, in October of 1977, she was 16. She was sitting at the kitchen table when the radio said what it said. A small plane in Mississippi, Ronnie Van Zant. Two others from the band. The weather had been bad over the route south. She put her hand in her front pocket. The lure was warm from the fabric. She held it without squeezing, the way she'd seen him hold it. Just the weight of it in her palm. The pain on the back was gone from all the years of turning, his fingers before hers and Lacey's before his. She thought about a man who sat down on a dirty sidewalk because he heard something real in a cracked guitar and didn't see any reason to keep walking. He hadn't explained anything. He'd sat down and listened, and then handed her the one thing in his pocket that had been his since childhood, trusting her to find the meaning on her own schedule. You know when to wait, and you know when to pull. Some things you hold until the right moment. Some things you move toward before you're ready, before you know if they'll hold. The music. Going home. Picking up the guitar in the days after someone who mattered is gone. She picked up the guitar. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to this channel. These aren't the stories in the documentaries. They're the ones passed along quietly, person to person, because they're true in a way that's hard to explain, but easy to recognize. Subscribe, leave your city in the comments, and tell us, has anyone ever stopped for you when everyone else kept walking? Write it below. We're listening.